Welcome to Capital Tiger Bay, our lunch where we're going to hear from candidates that are running for the office of Mayor of the City of Tallahassee. I'm glad you're all here. I'm Gil Ziffer. I am first Vice President of Capital Tiger Bay, and it is a pleasure to be a part of this organization and lead this meeting today. The first one is, do you attend FSU sporting events and where do you sit? I know I'll get in trouble for this one, but I have to ask it anyways, and I'm sure each one of you have thought about this, but do you live in the city limits? If you win the mayor's seat, will you be running for governor in 2020 or 2022? These were given to me. This one is actually a favorite of mine. Since the public is limited to 3 minutes of comment, would you consider, please, limiting commissioners' comments to just 3 minutes too? That's actually a good question. And then finally, and I didn't write this, this was submitted to me. Have you always wanted to be mayor, or just since Gil Ziffer dropped out of the race and it became competitive? I'd like to now introduce the person that's going to be running the show from this point forward, Gary Fineout, who is no stranger to at least many of us that are in government. But Gary is a graduate of Florida State, started at Florida Flambeau, has worked for the Tallahassee Democrat, New York Times regional newspapers, Miami Herald, Florida Tribune, and now he is a writer and a reporter for the Associated Press. Gary Fineout, why don't you come up and run the show for us? Thank you.
Oh, wow.
High tech.
Well, I guess you all didn't learn your lesson a couple of years ago when you decided to have me back as a moderator. I don't know why, but I appreciate it. Thank you again for asking me to help out with this. No further ado, I would like to go ahead and the order to begin with again is Mr. Dailey, and then Ms. Litherland, Michelle Rewinkle-Gastelinda, and then finally Dustin Daniels. And if you would, take it away.
Good afternoon, Tiger Bay. My name is John Dailey, and I want to be the next mayor of the city of Tallahassee. For the past 12 years, you've given me an incredible opportunity to serve on the county commission, and for that, I'm thankful. But folks, we're at a crossroads. No matter who wins the municipal elections, the majority of your commission is going to be brand new. And that's why it is so important that we elect the right leader to be the next mayor of the city of Tallahassee. We need to elect a strong leader that's going to provide the vision and the strategic plan for our community so that we can move forward. We need a leader as mayor that's going to work in a proactive position with the city commission, with senior administration, that can bring this community back together to write the next chapter. We need a leader that has experience, knows municipal governance, understands municipal services, but yet is a fresh face at City Hall that can bring new ideas to the table for consideration. We need a leader that's going to bring back transparency, accountability to City Hall. I am your candidate. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Carrie Litherland, and I have lived here in this community for the majority of my life. Unfortunately, I can't say my entire life. I was born in Ohio during the storm of the century in 1993 and kept me away for 3 days. And if my mom didn't know then that not even the biggest storm of the century would stop me, she knows now that these big storms aren't going to stop me either. I jumped into this race because when I had my daughter in September, that passion I had for this community turned into a need to take action. And I thought the best place to make sure that this was the best community for her to grow up in and have the resources she needed was to run for mayor. I believe that we can grow as a community without losing who we are. I love the character and soul of this community. I love our neighborhoods, I love our parks, and I love our trees. But I also understand that we need to grow. And I think we can do both without compromising who we are, and that's what I want to do. I am young, ready, and willing to do this job. I think we have seen my generation step up and take charge of big issues, and I'm not afraid of the big issues. So I look forward to answering more questions. Thank you.
We didn't do that on purpose, I swear.
All right. So I'm Michelle Ravenko-Vasco-Linda, and I've served this community in elected office from 2008 to 2016. And our dear Mary Ann Lindley gave me a moniker, and that moniker was that I had charm and grit. And I think that's the way I've served in the legislature, and that's the way I'll serve this city. When I was in the legislature, I passed bills, I passed amendments, I killed bills, and I also got state employees the first raise that they had in over 6 years. Obviously, those people under $40,000 got a raise, and those people over $40,000 got a bonus. I'm very proud of the work I did in the legislature on your behalf, and I learned a lot. I learned to ask tough questions. I learned to work with all kinds of folks on behalf of the people that I was elected to represent. And I will do that again as your elected mayor. I will work as hard as I did in the legislature, and I will use that energy and experience to bring this city to its full potential. I hope I have your vote.
Good afternoon, Tiger Bay. My name is Dustin Daniels, and I want to be your next mayor. I grew up in a working class family in Central Florida. My mother and my grandmother were disabled the majority of my life. My dad worked an hourly wage job. I became a juvenile criminal offender by the age of 12. But for a family who believed in me and that worked hard, I probably wouldn't be standing before you here today. And since that time, I've achieved a little bit of an unlikely life trajectory. I was the first person to graduate from high school, the first to go to college. I was student body president at Florida State. I teach economics now at Florida State University, and for the last 4 years, I served as chief of staff and director of legislative affairs for the city of Tallahassee. I'm in this race very specifically because I believe that we live in a tale of two cities, where a person's zip code defines their destiny and the opportunities that they see. We know that Tallahassee is one of the smartest cities in the state of Florida and in the country, but we also know that 41% of people either live below the poverty line or are living paycheck to paycheck. I think that we fail to realize the manner in which our local government, particularly city government, can lean in on these issues and move the needle in a very profound way. I look forward to serving as a leader as we write the next chapter of our city's history and building one Tallahassee. Thank you.
Tallahassee's crime rate dropped last year, but the rate remains among the highest in the state. As a commissioner, is there anything different that you would recommend the city to do if you were elected? And please be specific, and I'm talking about anything from decriminalization to gun regulations or whatever you think is would be a solution.
Absolutely. So I think that we have absolutely began to invest and empower our law enforcement to do what it is they need to do to handle this crime issue, but we've had absolutely no plan on what to do on the front end and the back end of the criminal justice system. We have 1,000 former criminal offenders that return to our community every 18 months. Right? When those people, just some numbers for you, when those people don't have access to housing or a job or mental health or substance abuse services, 70% of them will commit another crime within 3 years. Right? What's that definition of insanity when you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? I submit to you that that is essentially what has been our crime fighting strategy to this point. As a youth former criminal offender, I believe in youth diversion programs, and I think we have to scale programs that work in this space and that are homegrown in this community.
This is a tough one in 45 seconds. So for me, it starts with community policing, and we've done that already, but we need to push it even further, making sure that we're doing the correct form of community policing, and that means making sure that in the budget we have given the TPD all the resources and benefits that they need to recruit and retain the best officers here. In addition, we also need to make sure that Chief DeLeo has the authority and that the commission isn't being the chief of police ourselves, and that it's truly him to make up those decisions. I also want to talk about public safety really quickly. I think that we address it from the beginning, it won't happen. So I think that if we get our kids, revitalize our recreation centers, make sure that the activities that they have are true to what they want, and get them in there, we'll see a decrease in crime. And we'll also see, I also want to see mental health resources in town. I think that's essential in when we talk about public safety. You can't be a great citizen if you're not healthy. Great, that was 45 seconds.
And I think we need to return to fundamentals. We are down about 30 to 40 officers in our full range of officers, and we also have 30 officers that are ready to retire. We need to make sure that we're recruiting the best and the brightest TPD force for this community. In addition, we need to make sure that the Consolidated Dispatch Center is fully functioning and ready to go. And that, we've had problems with that as well. So fundamentals is the first step. First things first. And then we can do some of these things that make complete common sense. that everyone else has spoken about. But we've got to get to the first things first, the things that are maybe not sexy, but absolutely have to be done. Recruit the best and the brightest law enforcement officers and get that consolidated dispatch center, good leadership, and those folks in good shape.
Numbers will be released that crime is down in the unincorporated areas by another 8%. Under Chief Harrison over at the Consolidated Dispatch Center, we hired 12 new dispatch officers in the first week alone, as a record that has not been matched by any other dispatch across the country. I agree with a lot of the other comments that have been made, but another thing that we need to concentrate on is, number one, the equipment that our law enforcement is using, specifically software. We need to make sure our law enforcement agencies can communicate with each other, and we need better cooperation between the police department, the sheriff's department, the state agencies, and the federal agencies to be able to move this community forward.
Currently, the FBI has an ongoing investigation, and recently the State Ethics Commission found probable cause that the former city manager misused his position by accepting gifts. Do you believe this has damaged the city's reputation? And if so, what would you specifically recommend to repair the damage?
To answer the question that was posed earlier, I sit in the stands at in the middle, on the edge near the band. That's where I sit. And yes, I try to attend most of them. So for me, it's hurting our reputation, and we need to address it head on. For me, I think that handing over the reins to our independent ethics board and asking them what we need to put in place is the right thing to do. We cannot tell them what ethics we want to follow. They need to tell us what we need to do. And it starts from the top. We need to build an air, a culture of complete transparency, integrity, and I think that I am a leader that can do that. Additionally, I want to see more public comment. I want a community-led local government. And so if we move towards that, we add more public time to speak, we change the way our commission meetings are held so that public comment is a priority, we'll see a decrease in all of the issues that we've seen so far.
And I do think that we have a bad reputation in this town, and I'm sorrowful for it. What we need to do is make sure that that gets straightened out first. Integrity is number one. You cannot do anything that's going to last or be any good unless you have integrity. And I tell my students at Tallahassee Community College, good business is good ethics is good business. And so that is the first thing. I think that cronyism and corruption trickles down on the street. I think what people see at the top is they say, well, then I'm going to go get mine on the street. And so I think if you clean up the corruption and cronyism, you'll be good. I also think that we need a conflict of interest checklist. I think we need Form 6. I think we need to strengthen the independent ethics board. And those are some of the things that I think we need to do.
And before Mr. Dailey, when you mean Form 6, you mean the form that the governor and certain local officials like county commissioners fill out, legislators
And
fill
that
out,
I did,
as
yes.
opposed to the Form 1, which is what city commissioners currently fill out.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's just wanted people to understand what you were doing.
Thank you.
Yes, we have a problem. Number one, I agree. All municipal officials should fill out Form 6 and not Form 1. Number two, we need a no-gift policy, period, from the very top all the way down to the very bottom. Number three, we need to strengthen the Ethics Commission on the local level. It's in our charter. Let's make it work. Number four, we need to have an audit of our entire budget to make sure we're on track, meeting our goals. Number five, we need to have a complete audit of our procurement policy at the City of Tallahassee to make sure that when we go to RFP, it is done fairly and transparently. And number six, we need strong leadership that's going to set the tone from the very top all the way down.
So we've heard a lot, folks, about strengthening the ethics commission. Let's talk about what that might look like. One of the things that I propose is a series of policies that I think would actually help the situation. One is a complete ban on accepting campaign contributions from city or county vendors. That's number one. Number two, I've said that we need stricter gift reporting from anybody who is a city employee who is accepting gifts from anybody in the public. I've also said that anyone that is lobbying before the city government who is not registered as a city lobbyist needs to either be fined or can be banned from lobbying for up to 10 years. And I think that we need a ban for individuals who are leaving city government before they can lobby before local government for a period of 3 to 5 years. I think this is not rocket science, right? We can just follow the money and follow the influence and do what is necessary to make sure that moving forward we have increased ethics and transparency.
Do you believe that city and county government, or at least city and county law enforcement operations, should be consolidated?
No, I do not think law enforcement ought to be consolidated. I think that's the one thing that shouldn't be consolidated. Absolute corruption corrupts absolutely, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and I think they need to be separated. We haven't gotten the consolidated dispatch center right yet, and so that needs to happen. Permitting can be consolidated, other things can be consolidated. We need functional consolidation, but I'm not sure we're ready for full-on consolidation in this town. So I would be open to it. I think if the people want it to save money and to make things more streamlined, I think that's appropriate. But at this point in time, I wouldn't go headlong into it. One of the things I would think about is we might need to move to a different form of government for the city, which would look like a strong mayor instead of a strong city manager.
I think we're heading in the right direction with our law enforcement. We've got the Sheriff's Department that's now running the CDA, and the veteran who is running the CDA right now ran the dispatch for the Sheriff's Department. And we've already seen with the new hires and our move towards accreditation that it is working. It's not a question of functional consolidation of law enforcement as much as it is the cooperation with the law enforcement. Remember, while we have 2 local agencies, we have over 30 agencies in our community when you add in the state police and the feds. It's important that we share information specifically on investigations as we track down these criminals, and it's about the software that we're using in the back office as well. When it comes to functional consolidation, look, I was chairman of the county commission for you twice. Both times we passed a 7-0 resolution saying, City of Tallahassee, we'll sit down with you and talk about functional consolidating our departments. Why do we run Parks and Rec? You run Parks and Rec. Why do we run animal control and you run the shelter? Both times, we did not even get a formal response from the mayor's office acknowledging that the county commission had passed a unanimous resolution. It's going to be a new day.
If I could ask a quick follow-up, Mr. Dailey. I'm not sure if that was a yes, a no, or a maybe.
I think under a council management form of government, it is appropriate to have a municipal government and a county government. By nature, the governments provide 2 different types of services, especially as long as we have the council management form of government.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here, I'll be a little bit more clear. No, I'm unequivocally not for consolidation. I've not seen a single report, a single piece of academics or research that has ever shown that in situations or in communities where consolidated government was applied, that led to better outcomes for their citizens. In fact, especially as it relates to political consolidation, what we found or what we find is that there are communities that essentially go from being relatively inclusive in the way that their elected officials represent the diversity of their community to being less inclusive in those situations. So I'm not for those things. I think cooperation makes a whole lot of sense. I think that to the extent that we can continuously have conversations between city and county about how we work better together, I think that's a no-brainer. Of course that makes sense, but for me, I think that this has been turned into a political football where we've been, essentially the public has been lied to about the potential benefits that we as a community could potentially enjoy if we went down this road. And again, ask for the research, ask for the facts, ask for the data, because when you go that far deep, you won't find any single example around the country where consolidation, again, has led to better outcomes for their community.
So throughout this campaign, I've said cooperation over consolidation. I absolutely think it's time that we make a bridge where we can communicate and that we have an open line of communication between the city and the county. For me, I live in Levy Park, and they use us as an excuse, our park as an excuse that there needed to be another city park nearby where a county park was already there. We are wasting our resources. We are wasting funds that could be used correctly. And towards your question about specifically law enforcement, no. I think that the more representation that we have and the more resource that we have to put boots on the ground and really reach out to the community is better. And I think having 2 separate entities is the way to go with that. But I've always talked about cooperation. It's something that we need in a leader. And I think that the leader needs to be able to communicate and communicate what the public wants. So when we talk about consolidation on a full level, I'd like to hear the community's comments before I make my final decision.
What do you think could be done to increase the economic impact and ridership activity at the Tallahassee Airport? I'm just curious how many people use the Tallahassee Airport on a regular basis. Okay. You're not like me, you don't drive to Panama City or Jacksonville? Okay, fair enough. Go ahead, sir.
Traditionally in this community, we have followed the economic model where we just hand a check out, bring in an airline, and once the subsidy drives up, the airline leaves, AirTran. It didn't work for JetBlue either. We have to have a paradigm shift in how we can lower the cost of a commercial flight ticket out of Tallahassee, therefore be able to increase the amount of people that are flying. First of all, it's a bigger question dealing with economic development and bringing businesses to our community and being able to have more traffic. But there's three variables that I believe that directly impact the cost of a ticket, which then increases the amount of people that are flying. Number one is indirect costs, department-to-department charges for support internally within the city. Number two is the price of fuel that is negotiated by the FBO, your fuel-based operator, and that should be taken into consideration as well. Number three is your landing fees and your gate fees. Gate fees for commercial planes that are flying, landing fees for your shipping. If you can have a direct and immediate impact on one of those three variables through the study that I have done and the people that I've talked to in the industry, it will have a direct impact on the price of a commercial airline ticket out of Tallahassee, which benefits us all.
So for me, I think that the airport is one of those continuous challenges that our community has faced. And I think that one of the biggest issues has essentially been that the city is really trying to tackle it by itself, right? If you think about major airports around the country, like Atlanta, for instance, they take a regional approach in the way that they not only advocate on behalf of their airport, but the way that they also provide services to the surrounding areas. To me, I would like to see a more comprehensive approach that includes our neighbors in Jackson County and Wakulla, as far as Thomasville. These are places and these are communities that also rely a lot or could rely more on our airport if they were just included and had a seat at the table. And then I'd also like to see a more sort of intentional conversation with a lot of our public sector organizations who, quite frankly, have a lot of purchasing power, right? A lot of times what these airliners are making a decision on is latent demand, right? The profit margins in the airline industry are so small that they want to know that if they come into a community that they're going to make money. What if we had the state of Florida, FSU, FAMU, TCC, the county, the city, all coming to the table and saying, we'd be willing to sign an MOU that says, if you came to our community, that we would use your service. I think that's the way you move the needle.
It baffles me that this is still a topic for conversation. I mean, since I have been little, the prices of airline tickets here in town have been about $200 to $300 just to get somewhere, and that's absurd. As I work as a legislative consultant here at the state level, I watch as representatives and senators have to fly out of our state to get to here. They have to go to Atlanta first and then they get here. And that's just wrong. I mean, that's taking money out of just not only our own community, but our state. So that it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. I do not have a background in this, and so I'm willing to work with those who do have a background in this and find out what cities that are like ours are doing to make sure that they have the right airline pricing, whereas it's economic incentives or what it is. For me, I think, my personal belief, is making sure that the entrepreneurs that we have in town right now that are creating these great innovations, they have a place for manufacturing and distribution, and we can utilize that and push those through our airports and utilize that even more.
Aviation fuel tax exemption for the capital city and airport authority, all those things I tried when I was in the legislature. Matter of fact, aviation fuel tax exemption for the capital city, I had teed up with Governor Christ and the Finance and Tax Committee, and it was ready to go until locals came in and said they didn't want it, and we never figured out why, because DOT was ready to do it too. So I have been also trying to work on this. There are ideas that we could put forward, like an airport authority, like an aviation tax exemption. I've also called on Governor Scott to take the problem that's going on in Atlanta right now and see if we can work on a mini hub. Atlanta is not technically able to really continue to go as a huge hub. We saw that as they broke down over the holidays and had a burnout, and then also they fall down every time there's ice on the roads, and we also now Delta does not have their aviation fuel tax exemption. So I'm working with Governor Scott to see what we can do about that.
Let's stay on the sexy topic of infrastructure, and Tallahassee owns and operates its own municipal utility, which is a large source of money to run city government. But its rates are higher than some, not all, private utilities. Would you ever be in favor of selling the utility to a private investor-owned utility?
No. Is my very quick, short answer that if we had 45 seconds would work much better than a minute. For me, the utilities is so important of a fabric in our community. I want to see us expand it even more. I think that we need to move towards using solar, using the renewable resources, and pushing that. I mean, we have residents in neighborhoods who are doing co-ops right now, and that hurts us. They're using co-ops to use solar energy in a way that's honestly innovative and smart, and that we should be doing as a city to make sure that we don't lose customers. This is one of our biggest revenue sources, and we need to maintain it and protect it, but make sure that we're doing the best service for our residents as well.
The problem with solar is that both the city and a private utility make money off of their fuel, so that becomes a problem too. I've been working in this area for a long time. I was on the Energy and Utilities Committee for 8 years, and here's what I know about our city. Our city is not just the capital city of the third largest state in the union and only has responsibility for its residents, but it also has responsibility for the state workers and the state buildings that are in our town. And I was in the meetings with Governor Scott and our mayor, and I saw the problems that occurred. I'm not saying that we should sell the utility, but what we do need to make sure is that we understand that we have the responsibility of the state in our hands here at the city. It is not just us, and if the lights go out and are out for 6 days because of a few drops of rain, it doesn't only affect the citizens of Tallahassee, it affects us statewide. So we've got to get this right, and I'm ready to do that, and I've got ideas to do that.
If I could quickly follow up, so what you're saying is you're not a flat no, you're open to
Right.
possibility.
I'm not a flat no.
Okay.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to sell the utility. But what we need to do if we're going to be a 21st century municipality and be on cutting edge of civic technology, we need to increase our public-private partnerships and bring in some of this amazing technology that's going on across the country, and let's try it here. For instance, when Portland, Oregon is working with the private community to put turbines in their 12-foot stormwater facilities underground, taking something that usually is a nuisance, stormwater, and turning it into a commodity when it rains to generate electricity, we should be doing that here. When we have Central Florida cities that are burying their power lines and putting their lines in insulated casings much bigger, therefore approaching the private industry and renting out space in their infrastructure, we should be doing that. We should be working with the solar industry and public-private partnerships. So as new technology comes on board that can help the citizens here in Leon County and the city of Tallahassee, we're moving our community forward. So it takes big picture thinking and leadership, but we are not going to sell the utility.
No, I would not consider selling the utility. This community, I think, but to your point, I think, which is an important one, there are too many people in this community who that aren't able to afford their utility bill, and that's a huge problem. To me, I think that we need to continuously double down on renewable energy resources. I support putting a plan together and not just paying lip service to a plan that gets us to 100% renewable energy by 2030. But I also think that we need to democratize solar and renewable energy in this community. It can't just be that the utility invests in things like solar farms and things like that. I would love to see us enable through revolving loan funds and programs like that to allow people to actually install solar panels in their own places of work, in their own businesses, in their own homes. I mean, I think some of the work that the city has done on demand side management, retrofitting homes to make them more efficient, to make them more cost effective from a utility standpoint, need to continue. I believe in those things 100%, but for me, I do think that the utility is a fundamental part of how we keep our services as quality as we can. But I do think that, to your point, we need to make sure that, that the individuals are not being pushed out of their homes because of the cost that it takes for their electricity.
Okay. Well, we have a curveball. Mr. Barr has arrived, and we're so glad you could join us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, well, thank Tiger Bay. I'm just up here winging it.
No problem.
Do you believe the city was adequately prepared to handle Hurricane Hermine? And if not, what needs to change?
No, we were not prepared to handle Hurricane Hermine, and I was in the meetings with the governor and the mayor and other stakeholders, and it was not pretty. We need to accept help from others, no matter what's going on. We need to make sure the city gets up and running. A lot of the ideas here are no-brainers and common sense, really. We do need to have underground utilities. We do need to work on whatever makes this city resilient. And on my website, frankly, that's one of the things that one of the three things that I think is most important here. Integrity, economic diversity, and resiliency. We have got to make sure that we are a resilient city and ready to go no matter what happens, because as I say, we have the responsibility really for the entire state in our hands. As far as working with solar and some of these other things that can be resilient, I have solar panels on my house. Those can be used as generators as we go forward with the technology. I was responsible with Thad Altman for passing the bill that allowed a referendum to do some of the loans and things for solar energy that are available in this state. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir. Yeah, we're going from the end to you.
We were not prepared for Hurricane Hermine. We need to have a better plan in place so that we can respond quicker. As far as the utilities is concerned, I too agree that we should have underground utilities. My background lends itself towards this question in that I used to be the project coordinator of the Broward County Consumer Energy Audit Office. So I'm familiar with energy conservation and think that we need a better plan in place, more so than being reactive, be proactive. When it rains, it seems, in Tallahassee, the electric power goes off. So there needs to be a better plan in place, particularly with our transformers, the whole 9 yards. We need to search just what needs to take place to continue to have electricity to our residents, because we are not consistent in providing that to our residents.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to get you off, sir.
No problem.
John Hendrick, he's holding a sign up.
Thank you.
Let me be very clear. I have the utmost respect for the men and women that work on the front lines for the City of Tallahassee Electric Utility, that leave their families at home to go out and work 24 hours a day in very determined situations so that we can have our power restored. The problem was not the front line. The problem was the very top. And quite frankly, hindsight 2020, our mayor was running for governor, and it got in the way of our public safety. That's why it's appropriate that we elect the right leader at the top that can work in a positive collaboration before a storm comes to make sure that all of our emergency operations centers from the federal government, state government, and local government will work seamlessly together, and that the relationships are there so that we are protected during the time of need.
So as a city employee for the last 4 years, I have to tell you I completely agree with the fact that we have to really be appreciative to the men and women, especially in our utilities, who wake up in times where it's dangerous and to get our power back on. I just wish that that same sentiment was shared, quite frankly, by Commissioner Dailey when the actual storm was here. When I wish I had saw him or some of his colleagues or anybody else up here on this dais when we were attempting to help individuals who were recovering from the storm, who needed generators to protect them from their temperature-sensitive medication, that weren't just showing up to the EOC when there was a press conference, right? That they were actually there on the front lines doing everything they can to move the needle forward. Now, that was the first storm that we saw in the age of social media. The city learned a couple of things. They changed a couple of things. There's still things that can be learned. But at the end of the day, I think that you need a mayor that's willing to step up and do everything possible, not only just for the people who are impacted by the storm in this community, but in the last storm, in Irma's situation, we had hundreds of evacuees from around the state that didn't know whether their homes or their properties were destroyed for where they left them. And we were the ones trying to feed them and give them everything that they needed. So I completely agree. We do need leaders that have been there on the front lines, shoulder to shoulder with our city employees doing this work.
Okay, well, we're going to give a chance for our first rebuttal. Since Mr. Dailey's name was mentioned, you have 30 seconds, sir.
In a council management form of government, it is not only inappropriate, but it is illegal for the elected officials to get involved with the day-to-day operations. It's called the non-interference clause. My hat goes off to Vince Long and the team from the county side that works day in and day out. Now, as the vice chairman of the county commission, Chairman Maddox and I were in those meetings with the governor and the mayor, And it was so embarrassing that the general public statewide were watching these deliberations going on. You're right, Dustin, I did not see you. I was at the Fred George Branch Library handing out bottled water. I was at the Fred George Branch Library packing sandbags. It's in the unincorporated, not in the city limits. I was driving my neighborhood, staying in touch with my people, following our plan of action, and as a result, the county response was positive and online. Did we learn a lot? Absolutely. But I am proud of the response that we put together.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll give it to you for
Okay.
quick rebuttal.
Listen, all I'll say is you can look at the public records of who was at the Emergency Operations Center, when they were there, for what time that they were there, and there's going to be some people's names that are missing from that, okay? We also know that we actually had a meeting where city employees were berated by individuals on the county side for not working hard enough. Rob McGarrett, I hate to call him out, but Rob McGarrett at the city, who was working night and day with no sleep, was literally brought to tears because of the things that were being said by our colleagues on the county side. So please, very, very much do not lecture me about what it is to work with our city employees to make sure that this community recovers.
All right, thank you. Okay, we hadn't gotten everybody's answer on the question. We'll get back to that.
I am so excited to go next. Okay, so the reason why you didn't see me was I was giving birth to my child.
You win.
No, I mean, on a serious note, I did have to leave. I had to leave our city, and that's not because that there aren't people working day in and day night. They are working. They shouldn't have to work that hard. We should have the infrastructure in place so that when we have a storm like this, it's not a day, every night away from your family fixing the situation. It should have been fixed at the beginning. I had to go to Georgia to have my child because we did not know if it was safe or if we would be able to get out of our home safely and have a newborn safely in a no-lit, no resource kind of home. On top of that, my grandfather is on oxygen and he has to leave every time there's a big storm coming. And that's just not okay. Someone on oxygen has to pack up everything to move up north. 10 seconds. I got a little heated there, sorry. It's about sustainability and making sure that we are putting in the things that we need. On the card that I put on the table, one of the points on there is looking at the most high-risk, high-need areas and making sure the ones that have the tree limbs and the most vulnerable residents have the underground power lines. There's no way we can do that all across the city with the flood zones that we have.
Can I do a quick follow-up to the second candidate to bring up underground utilities?
Yeah.
Just a simple question. Who should pay for those underground utilities since they are no doubt an expensive undertaking?
Thank you for asking that question because I think it's in the budget. We're just using the funds and we're wasting the funds on other projects like a restaurant, like splash pad, things like that. So I think that the money is in the budget. It's just not being used correctly for the residents who need it the most.
How would you grade the current performance of the Community Redevelopment Agency? And I want to add on to that, a second part of that, let's strip away the problems of the CRA. I also like the candidates to answer, do you generally support the idea of giving out incentives, taxpayer money, to help out private businesses?
I think that the CRA is a good organization to have. I don't think that they've kept the focus for which they were formed. Do I think that it's good to provide funds to private organizations? It depends upon what the organization is and what it brings to the betterment of the city of Tallahassee.
Some people saying that they can hear you.
Okay.
So, just for the next
question.
Go ahead, Mr. Dailey.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a true believer in the CRAs when they're used appropriately, when we use the funds appropriately. CRAs are for investing in infrastructure, okay? And CRAs are for your streets, for your sidewalks, and we're supposed to do it in a specific geographic area that is means tested by state law when we create them. I served on the CRA 8 years ago. During that time, I was very proud of the votes that I took to place the infrastructure on Gain Street. It was very important to lay the foundation, being able to move forward. And I'm looking at my colleagues, Nancy Miller, Mary Ann Lindley, Curtis Richardson, that we played a very important role in that. I would love to bring the CRA back to its original form in the downtown the Frenchtown Southside CRA, and be able to work specifically in those neighborhoods to revitalize those neighborhoods. When done appropriately, they do amazing things. When we talk about incentives, I think we need to clearly define, if you're talking about a straight check, straight handout, versus, we have state workforce incentives that we work with DEO. We have local government incentives as well. So that's a whole conversation. And so to answer the question, in general, yes, I do support tax credits and workforce training that's available through the state and local government. But if you're talking about the straight subsidies, that's another conversation. Good question.
So in our city, one of the reasons why I believe that so much inequality exists is because we have a history of, in an equitable way, that public resources have been spent. If you look, literally over the last several decades, there have been areas that have been systemically neglected as it relates to infrastructure, as it relates to just economic opportunity in general. I believe that CRAs are a great equalizer, or at least can be, in helping some of those areas to catch up with everywhere else, quite frankly, that are 30 or 40 years behind everywhere else. So the question about incentives, I do support incentives in some regard, but I think that we absolutely have to tie them to a return on investment strategy. If we are using taxpayer dollars, right, to invest in a company, right, for whatever they're asking for, parking garage, tax abatement, what are the citizens of this community getting back for that? Are we going to ask those folks to make sure that when if it's a construction project, that those dollars are going to stay local, right, through a labor agreement? And so, for me, I think that we have to absolutely use our CRA to promote economic development. And I'll just say this, I really would like to see the South Side get the same treatment that Gain Street did as it relates to using CRA dollars to promote economic opportunity.
The quick answer is yes, I do believe that the CRA has a place in our community. I think it has not been done well or right, and I want to see it go back to what it's supposed to be. I've talked about on this campaign that 12 years ago, Frenchtown put a plan together and put it towards the city and said, hey, we need these things. Could you bring these to our community? And that's what the CRA was supposed to do. They asked for single-style family homes. They asked for completed sidewalks and streets that were lit, somewhere that they could safely grow and have their family. And instead they got student housing, and that's not what the incentives are supposed to be for. We have student housing, we have unsafe student housing, we don't even have the regulations that are needed to make sure that the buildings that we're building are safe enough for the students. And if you don't believe me, go try and live in one. So I think that it has a purpose, it needs to be used correctly. I think that, it just baffles me that we are able to use the funds to support some businesses, but not all of them, and that we need to have a streamlined process so that the businesses that really need it, that need the incentives, the ground-up, community-led businesses, have access to the same money that the big groups and that the insiders and the developers and corporations have.
The first thing I'd like to say is I think linemen and utility workers should be considered first responders almost. They do work hard, and I appreciate them greatly, so I didn't want that to go without being said. As far as the CRA, I think it's been in a cloud of corruption and cronyism, and I think we need to get rid of both of them, or at least put a moratorium on them. I'm very tired of diffusion of accountability. I think the commission should be working on these issues as to where to put infrastructure. And as far as incentives, I don't think we should be paying any company to come here. I think what we should do is if we build it, they will come. We have one of the best workforces in the state of Florida that also rivals some in the United States. We need to market our town, we need to make sure we've got the infrastructure, but we should not pay anybody to move here. One of the things that we had in the state legislature were film tax incentives, and those were based on sales tax receipts. That's a whole different ballgame, and that's not giving away anything. That is giving an exemption for sales tax receipts, and we can think about that.
All right. I don't think people can hear you.
If it comes down to an arts group versus what the South Side should have, I want them to have the sidewalks that they have been talking to me about as I stand on the street corners and wave trying to get elected. They need to be included in what's going on. I want to see more funds sent directly to them, not hampered in the process. There's this little process you have to go through, but at the end, they never get anything at all. So we need to clarify that and straighten that up.
All right, thank you. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our closing statements, and since you weren't here for the opening statements, you're going to get to go first with the closing statements. How about that? And then we'll follow up. It's a little bit jumbled here. It's not the same order, but it'll be Mr. Barr followed by Mr. Daniels, then followed by Ms. Ray Linda, followed by Ms. Slytherin, and then Mr. Dailey last.
Thank you, Tiger Bay, for having me. I apologize. I was at the Ethics Board interview, and it went a little long, but I'm here now. My name is Norris Barr, and I'm a candidate for mayor of the city of Tallahassee. I am doing this totally for altruistic reasons. I have 18 plus years at the state, county, and city level that I want to utilize to help the city of Tallahassee shine. I'm not beholden to anyone, no special interest group, no developers. I want to be the person who represents the citizens of this city, and I can do it. I'm unbossed and unbought. Vote Barr, vote better.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you, Tiger Bay, for the opportunity to have this conversation. For me, I just think that we really are at the brink of a real change in Tallahassee. I believe that we can build a true 21st century city that works for everyone, but I think that we have to start thinking differently about our greatest challenges and opportunities. Instead of only using economic incentives like we just talked about, what about investing in people? What if we had the opportunity for free community college, vocational and technical training? Instead of us wondering why we're one of the most unequitable communities in the entire country, what if we were actually to achieve equity in the way that public dollars are spent, and again, catch up neighborhoods that are 30 or 40 years behind everywhere else? And we have to, again, a 21st century city thinks about its crime issues differently. What about, instead of law enforcement, if we invested in the people who are returning to our community to give those folks an opportunity and a chance to right their lives? To me, I think that's where you move the needle in a really profound way. And the last thing I'll just say is I believe that we do not need establishment politicians who, quite frankly, have not prioritized these issues. We need action, and if given the opportunity, I will work as hard as I can every single day if given the opportunity. Thank you for the consideration.
I've had just under 300,000 votes cast for me. I've won 5 elections and been vetted in 5 elections. You sent me to the State House, and I learned a great deal. And that's mine. Anyway, I'll talk about it. And I learned a great deal, and I want to bring what I've learned, the experience I've learned, to offer to you to do good for this city. I have the network, I have the creative problem solving. I may not be the smoothest speaker on the panel, never have been. It's just not my forte. But I will bring creative problem solving, common sense ideas to this city to help it reach its full potential. I want to make sure that we've got the fundamentals correct, and then I want to make sure that we work on economic diversity. We have had a national lab here for years, and we have not found a way to utilize that. We have the electric ship consortium here, and we have not found a way to bring business in around that. We have also had 2 wonderful universities and an engineering school. We have every single thing we can have here to reach our full potential as the capital city of the 3rd largest state in the union. Thank you. Hold on. Wait.
I was hoping I'd have my own soundtrack too.
Yeah.
And I'm running because I truly believe that it's time that we have a community-led local government. I am a neighbor, I am a mom, I've been a resident here for so long, and it's just time that the community has a chance to speak again. I remember watching as Myers Park put on a full-scale campaign to have their voice heard by the commission. They had to go out and buy yard signs and show up in 200 people in red shirts. And I think that that's not right. And the people in Frenchtown don't have the ability to do that. And so by not allowing us to have that community engagement, we lose a lot of resources and a lot of bright minds here. I do not plan to run for governor. I do not plan to run for higher office. My city is not supposed to be a political jumping off point. I plan to go to law school and do civil rights and human rights law and put my efforts back into the community just like now. Please check out our website. It's carriefortally.wordpress.com, and there's signs in the back if you'd like them, and I'd love to hear your questions later. But please consider me as your candidate in the primary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiger Bay. I am very lucky to have two wonderful parents. My mother's in the back of the room that taught me from an early age that public service is noble, it's right, it's a great way to give back to your community. And I am truly blessed to be married to a wonderful woman for 20 years who's in the back of the room as well, with my brother Charlie and my two nephews. My family wholeheartedly supports because they know this comes from my heart, because I'm from Tallahassee and I love Tallahassee. And this community has made me who I am today. Many of you in this room helped raise me. I want to be the mayor that you can be proud of. We're going to restore integrity. We're going to restore transparency. We're going to restore City Hall. Because at the end of the day, it is your city. It is your City Hall. And it's our community. I want you to be a part of the Dailey team. I want you to be a part of the future and help me write the next chapter. My name's John Dailey. I want to be your next mayor. Thank you.